Hello, everybody. It's Friday. It's midday, which means it's Wow Ergonomics. Now, you may have spotted already that Stephen is not here. That's because he's out gallivanting all over the country. He probably will be watching this at some point, maybe on a train, maybe in his car, not while he's driving. I can promise you that, because safety first. But don't worry, we have a fun-packed and quite informative show for you today. Backer, thank you so much for sponsoring the show. You are now going to disappear so that we can make room for our wonderful guests. Please welcome the guys from Ergochair, who will introduce themselves, and Laura as well. Hello, everybody.
Hello, hello, hello. Hello.
Hello.
Hello. Hello is just such a great word, isn't it? We all start with the word hello. There we are.
I mean, you asked us to, so.
Well, yeah. Actually, I asked people to introduce themselves, and everyone went hello, 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 which sounded like a gaggle of policemen. We are here today to talk about the assessment process for chairs and what that involves. But please, before we start that, let's introduce ourselves properly. So, please, folks from Ergochair, would you like to introduce yourself? Tell us who you are, a little bit about Ergochair as well.
Gav, I'll let you introduce yourself first.
As the newbie, so I'm kind of fresh into the building, 3rd month in. So I come from a customer relationship management background. Worked my last job for 12 years. And now in this environment, it's completely new to me. So still getting used to the wonderful world we live in. Graham, you're probably a little bit closer to what we do, but really enjoying it. I work in the projects team. Lots of exciting stuff coming out this year that we're working towards. So some more big things happening from Ergochair, and especially myself driving it.
Lovely. Right, we'll hear a little bit more about that in a minute. And also Andy, say hello.
Hello again. So I'll try not to bore people. I've probably said it a couple of times on this on Wow Ergonomics. I'm Andy. For those of you who don't know, I'm the role's business development manager at Ergochair, but there's so many different sort of areas that I get involved in, which is great because every day is different. So that could be, some of the marketing stuff, some of the assessments, accounts, ISOs, which are super duper fun. But yeah, just really it's great because it's sort of every aspect of the business. And then a little bit about Ergochair. In a nutshell, we manufacture bespoke office chairs. So really the core market is anyone that might have a musculoskeletal condition. They could just have a bit of a bad back, a pre-existing disability, anything like that. And yeah, we're just trying to work with our great dealers to essentially get a product for someone that might not necessarily have ever thought that they could sit comfortably. And that's pretty much us in a nutshell. And like Gav said, lots of exciting things this year. So I'll say watch this space. I'm sure you'll get to know Gav a little bit more. But yeah, that is us.
Okay, well, not to make you nervous or anything like that, but I can see the numbers of people watching going up as we speak. So that's wonderful. Guys, in order to make sure that, because I will cut bits of this out later and put them on the interweb for people to enjoy or laugh at, or both. Do get in a little bit nearer. I mean, don't be shy. Hold hands.
We're still getting familiar with each other.
Gav, I've only got part of your face at the moment.
Okay.
Laura, lovely to have you back as well. But for people that haven't seen you before, just introduce yourself, please.
Okay, so I'm Laura Mathias. I overshare on LinkedIn is what I'd say, which is probably how I met you, Graham. So I'm she, her, and 32-year-old, very big, bald, beautiful woman, and trying to embrace that in every aspect of my life. So I wouldn't necessarily say that I would have thought I was the target audience for an Ergochair, but somehow serendipitously, like it's happened, and I during lockdown was having some back problems that I'd never had before. I mean, I'm only 32 years young, for goodness sake, but obviously when you've been suddenly gone from working in an office to being at home and you're sitting on a dressing table, as I was at the time, I've still got the furniture kind of stuck behind me because I've just got a new desk as well to match my lovely new chair. yeah, I had to go to a chiropractor because I realized I was getting lots of aches and pains because the chair I was sitting on was a dining room chair that I'd stolen from my mother's house. So yeah, it was really, really great to welcome the Ergochair team into my house. And I know we'll talk about the bizarre measuring experience. It was so detailed and intense, and I had no idea what was happening. They kept saying it wasn't going to be magic, but I would like to argue otherwise, but we'll get on to that.
Okay, well, that's good to hear. But yeah, this is where it started, because I do believe you actually put out a little bit of a post saying, ouch, you know, you were like a lot of people after COVID. And I'm not saying that people didn't work from home before. I certainly worked from home before COVID, but that kind of excelled this kind of rush to work from home, because we had to, a lot of us. And as you say, a lot of people just naturally went, oh, what have I got to work at? And you don't necessarily have a nice desk set up and a chair and whatever in the corner of your room at home. So you actually just go, oh, well, I'll use a bit of dining room table, or I'll use a makeup table, or whatever you can get your hands on. And then the four-legged chair comes out, or, you go out and buy something very quickly and dump it in place and hope that it might all work. But I think so many people had that experience. So, Andy, can you kind of attain to that actually you saw lots of that as we went into home working?
Yeah, it was, to be fair, being that sort of, I was going to say step away, because we've got the dealers across the country that are sort of the first point who would be speaking to these people. However, in terms of, our own products, we did some of our, say, more home worker type chairs being utilized, whether that was a little bit of marketing that we did in conjunction with, actually, it was pretty common knowledge that home working was more so now for everyone, rather than potentially being a bit of a benefit for some people. And that was great, because what you saw was sort of good 3-lever mech chairs being used, because people just needed something that actually supported them, had a nice range of adjustments, had the ability to not require, a real detailed assessment. So if you have a tape measure and someone in your house, you can measure up, and it's, I think I've said it before, it's like that Marks and Spencer's type suit fit. So you pick the best size back, the best size seat. And then that's something ergonomics gets utilized quite a lot, but we call it good ergonomics, because it's just giving you something that will allow you to work, sit comfortably without, like the majority of people ended up doing, sitting on a dining chair, which is super hard. There's no support. And yeah, it definitely caused some issues for people that probably wouldn't have had them for certainly a number of years. But actually, moving on from that, hybrid working is now more of a go-to. So in terms of sort of from the commercial side of it, I think companies are understanding that, a lot of people work at home 2 days a week, in the office 3 days a week. So what do you need from that? A duplicate chair. Fantastic. So that's obviously from a commercial point of view been great, but actually from sort of like the workplace well-being ideology behind it, it's great, because actually people, when they're at home, I think because of what happened, particularly obviously during COVID, there was always a stereotype. If you're working at home, are you really doing that? But people were able to still do their jobs working from home. Companies were still running with their employees working from home. So I think they understand that if you can get them into a comfortable working position at home, it is a benefit for the company as well as just, the individual.
I'd like to bring Laura in on that. Is it, from your experience of it, Laura, is it a bit of a sort of fallacy, as it were, that actually if people are working from home, they're being lazy, or can be lazy? Because typically I tend to find that people, if they're working from home, actually just work more. Mm-hmm. Did you find that?
I mean, I'm not going to speak on behalf of the full workforce in the UK or beyond, but as for me, obviously, when I came on and I introduced myself and I gave a visible description, and my subheading here is visible difference campaigner. So this might seem like an odd kind of partnership and a passion that I'd want to talk about Ergochair, but that's because I am just one of many people that was suddenly forced into this home working situation. And for me, that came with a lot of positives in the sense that I finally, after nearly 2 decades, embraced my alopecia and came out about it, as it were, something that in the workplace I literally had refused to disclose to employers. I felt so ashamed to have a visible difference. I've finally got an ADHD diagnosis, so I'm kind of learning. So I'm learning all these things about myself, my mental health, like confidence in the workplace. But the very practical side of things, this ergonomics that we talk about from a consumer perspective, I'm sorry to say, it really isn't sexy. Like, it didn't mean anything to me. All I knew is all of a sudden I was having to pay 50 quid to go to a guy down the road because I was getting such bad pains in my top left of my back, which I'd never had before in my whole working life. So yeah, I can confirm I've definitely obviously was sitting at the computer, and I do sit at the computer for hours at a time. Can I say that means I was not being lazy? I don't know, because when you're not comfortable on your chair, I can confirm, especially with the neurodivergence, I found it so hard to concentrate. Like, I do need to be comfortable, but for me, that means being able to twist, move up and down. Like the table I've actually just got is a sits down desk because I went through Access to Work and I confirmed to my workplace that I needed the funding to get that sorted for me. What's so interesting, I think, about this is if you don't have that support from work, which I would hope, and Ergochair is great at putting forward the well-being aspect and hopefully working and partnering with organizations so that they want to support their colleagues to get that in place. But if you're going to invest to do it as a single consumer, it is a big investment, but it's like, it is a chair for life. That's the whole point. And when you think about the other stuff you spend your money on, and I'm sitting on this chair over 8 hours a day sometimes because I do a lot of extracurricular stuff at the computer as well. So that sounds really creepy. Yeah, I mean, like volunteering and
It doesn't at all. Actually, Jodie raised the same sort of point. It was a double-edged sword, really, in the whole of the COVID sort of period. A lot of people did actually struggle to get equipment through their employer, or actually, a lot of people got a stipend from their employer, but it just wasn't enough. Mm-hmm. You know, it was like, here's £200, buy yourself everything you need. Now they know, a lot of these companies knew that wouldn't go hardly anywhere towards the equipment. They bought office chairs and stuff before and desks at work. You know, most people know that just a standard office desk will cost you probably more than £200. And yet it's like, oh, here's a bit of money, sort yourself out at home. Almost like this is a benefit we're giving you, you know, but it really wasn't enough. But I think people are now starting to take this whole area a lot more seriously and understand that, you know, that one of the things that we've seen as well in this whole period is a generational thing coming in as well, which is that I think Gen Z and beyond are actually thinking about work in a very, very different way. And actually, it's less about necessarily all about the money and that long-term position, but actually I want something out of work that means that I enjoy life as well, because it's not so much about work-life balance anymore. It's more about sort of enjoying work as part of life. And that with that as well, if I'm uncomfortable doing this stuff all day long, I don't want to do it. Would you say that's fair enough, everybody?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm waiting to see when you get these you know, when you get job descriptions, it comes with X, Y, Z. I'm waiting to see one of the lines that would essentially be like a good workstation. But hey ho.
Work in progress.
I don't know whether it will say a good workstation, but I think maybe what it will say is that we have a well-being program, and as part of that well-being program, we will help listen to you, and we will provide training, education and adjustments if that are needed in order to make you comfortable at work. I think that's what it is, because it's about, it's an individual package, isn't it, really, for every individual. And that's the point. What we're ultimately looking for here is flexible accommodation, really. What Harry wants is going to be different from what Sylvia wants, maybe.
Yeah,
Laura?
and I've got to admit, I had no idea how individualized it was going to be. So when I made my appointment, they're like, "Oh yeah, no, we're going to come to your house and like measure you," and God forbid ask me how much I weighed. I was like, "Well, post lockdown, that's going to be a treat, isn't it?" But you know, you've got to embrace these things, because the whole point is, and I've just seen Chris's comment, the hours and the weeks of our life that we spend just sitting in front of a laptop. Of course, it needs to be unique to my body. Of course, I needed to tell them about some of the pain I'd had, because then we were looking at my workstation and working out what it was that was causing that. So, yeah, but I didn't quite expect Andy to come with like his measuring tape. I don't know what I expected, but it wasn't that.
My high-tech boards, that's what it is.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk at length, if you like, about those expectations and then what happened within the process, because I think that would be really good for everyone to hear. But before we do that, I just want to ask you one simple question, Laura, which is, before this all happened, if you'd have been faced with, I need an office chair for office work, where would you have gone before? What sort of, what would you have thought of in terms of this? Oh, that's what I need to do to find an office chair.
I mean, in all honesty, I would have just Googled office chair. If Staples isn't in administration, I don't know, like I would have gone there, or, God, is that a really old school reference? I'm guessing I'd fuel the commercial awfulness that is Amazon, sorry, and I'd probably have just gone for whatever was cheapest and looked vaguely comfortable. Maybe I would have thought aesthetically, does it go, like a nice blue to go in my office? And I would have just hoped for the best, as I've approached most furniture I've ever bought. I just see it as furniture. And yet that is silly, because I've got a spare bed that I have never had to sleep on in my life. So I don't need to worry or think about that. But this piece of furniture gets more use from me than it's this and my sleeping bed,
Yeah, absolutely. Well, bringing in sort of Chris's, and you mentioned Chris's comment a minute ago about his analogy of 40-hour week, 50 weeks per annum, 2,000 hours a year sitting in your chair. Might seem like a lot of investment if you're talking £1,000 a chair or whatever, but actually when you break it down, it's quite inexpensive. And actually, here's one for all of you: if you drive sort of a BMW 5 Series car or whatever, how much do you think that the driver's seat in that car would cost?
I mean, we know from our other product that we've been told that if you were to bespoke a car seat, I think they said about 1,500 to 2,000. Yeah, within it. So yeah, quite pricey.
Well, typically, yeah, in any kind of reasonable car, the driver's car seat, as a cost element of that car, if it's got any kind of adjustable lumbar or it's got any kind of movement and heating or whatever, it's going to be around about the $2,000 to $2,500 mark. And if you think, for a lot of people, they might use that car to drive to and from work. Now, a lot of people do commute, but some people, 15 minutes a day in and out of the car, or 20-minute commute, and that's it. That's what you get out of that seat that's cost you that sort of money. Yeah. And yet people go, oh, office chair, might spend a tenner on it. It's just like, as you say, it's ludicrous when you start to actually think, I'm going to spend 8 hours a day in this. It just doesn't compute. Why would you not spend that money? And and when you then break it down, it works out about the same as a decent cup of coffee a day. You'd stop and have a decent cup of coffee a day just because you like the taste of coffee.
Yeah.
To spend that sort of money on actually helping your body stay in shape.
I mean, a couple of bits. So picking up from what Chris says, we always look at it that on average, so an average salary, if someone's off for 2 weeks in a year because they do have a bad back or something to do with their workstation arrangement, that's, if you can get them back in for 2 weeks, that will pay for the adjustments to be purchased. And then on the other side, when you're saying about working for 8 hours and spending money in that. The analogy we use fairly often is how much would someone spend on their mattress? And you know, it's Laura's probably I've had it before I even started in Ergochair. Laura's probably how you've had it, Graham. So would Gav. That if you go to look for a new mattress, in your head you're immediately sort of like, this is going to be an expense, but you know, I'm in that for 8 hours a night. And it's such a similar philosophy with your chair, because it's near enough the same sort of times that you should be, I guess, sleeping. But yeah, it's and it's I've recently got a new bed, and it's interesting because you go there and they're trying to talk to you about the different foams and stuff. I'm like, it's so similar. But that's the easiest analogy, because anyone, you know, we know people look at an office chair, and if they don't, I was the same before I started at Ergochair. It's a chair, you know, I'll sit on it and I won't use the adjustments. I'll just sit on it. But the human mindset with a mattress is they understand that they need something that's going to be supportive, fit their body. You know, is that super memory foam? Is it just standard memory foam? And then they're willing to actually put that expense out there because they know it's worth it.
Nice little it's true. Now, Laura, so you made the appointment, you phoned these people up, they arrive at your house. What happened? Talk us through the process.
I mean, what did happen? 2 very jolly men suddenly rocked up in my very boring working day. And I was like, oh, I've got a meeting in an hour. Is that enough? And they were like, oh, yeah, no, I think we can. And we whizzed through it. They had basically a mock chair. We did come and look up at my study space, but then I decided I wanted to do it. There was more space downstairs. So once they'd kind of had a look and measured my desk space that at the time I was working to, although then kind of very gently reprimanded me for working at a dressing table that is clearly not designed to be a working desk. Yeah, so we had this mock-up chair downstairs, and I felt like I was being measured for like a dress to go to the Oscars, but it was a chair. Like, that's the level of like care and all the measuring tapes. There was a lot of stuff about letting me trial aspects. So basically, the mock-up chair was like a blank piece of paper, and we kind of built on preference by preference. So I remember there was a lot of Andy putting this weird pillow, asking me to put this weird pillow behind my lower back and like squeeze the thing to get the right level of like support. And I was overthinking it, obviously, neurodivergent / just generally an overthinker. But what was brilliant was every time I was like, oh no, but is that going to be fixed? And they were like, no, the whole point is these are all going to be adaptions that you can adjust once you have your chair. So we're just trying to get the base level of what you need, but you will be able to, and I still can. I've still got this weird little, it won't come up on camera, I can't show you, but yeah, I do occasionally squeeze up and give myself some lower back support, you know, so, but yeah, they were just very passionate and very knowledgeable. And I thought, well, a lot of this is going to go over my head. And I do just remember them repeatedly explaining, like, this isn't a magic wand. It's not suddenly going to fit. Like, if you're struggling with back problems, like, your body's going to have to heal. Like, you're going to have to adjust. But I can definitely say I have seen a massive difference since sitting on a proper chair.
That's brilliant to hear. What was the biggest learning takeaway for you? Was there something where you thought, actually, I really didn't know that?
I think there was a whole bit that we did that was about the flexibility. So, like, basically, you shouldn't be rigid when you're like, your body naturally moves. You talk like I'm quite, you know, chatty, movie. Like, so it'd be weird if my body was trying to move. Like, the chair needs to move with me. And I remember we were doing the thing where I was basically like, they were like, no, trust it, you can rock back as far as you go. And I was like, I don't like this. I didn't even do the death slide when I was a child. This is too scary. And Andy was behind me like, you're not going to fall. But that idea of this chair is basically an extension of my body while I'm sitting at this desk was kind of a bit mind-blowing to me.
Do you know what? For me, that kind of mirrors probably every single conversation that I've ever had when it comes to a chair and assessment. I think and I find it particularly English. So if anyone's watching and you're from a different part of Europe, etc., you probably might have a slightly different viewpoint of this, because I will tell you now, especially when I've visited like Scandinavian countries or Holland, for example, they're so much more used to body movement, especially when working. But in the UK, we're incredibly fixated on, I'm working, I kind of just want to be supported in a position. And that whole idea of movement is quite alien to us. But actually, it is one of the most fundamental things. And actually, it's true that a lot of, say, lesser chairs, for example, or a lot of poorer equipment won't actually support your body weight properly. And that's possibly where it comes from too, right? I have been there and I've seen it in situ. I have literally been into a good example of this is I went into an optician's once and I saw an optician sitting on what is basically a child's chair. And I could see the base of the chair actually bending in the middle like this because it just wasn't designed to take an adult's weight. And you think actually if your experience is of something that isn't designed to do the job, then you probably should be scared, because actually you try and rock back on it, you're probably going to fall off of it, etc. But a good chair, if it's at the right weight loading for your size, will support you. And you can kind of prove that to people, as you had that experience too. You can kind of rock someone in it and go, you're not going to fall. This will take probably twice your weight, but also it will move with you and allow you to move. And that is really, really important, as Chris has just said. And I used to have t-shirts with something similar on. The next posture is the best posture. Mine actually said that the next position is the best position, but yeah, which was slightly more risque. But it's a good philosophy, isn't it? It is a good philosophy to have. Andy, how?
Version, yes,
yes, absolutely.
Keep this PG, thank you.
Andy, how often do you come across this? People not understanding that they can get dynamic support out of a chair.
Well, yeah, again, with us being that step away, it's only, if we are doing, say, a manufacturer's assessment, it's certainly not unheard of to go to their current work surface. They're in a decent £500-600 chair. I mean, this is probably to do with not wanting to play with the controls, but there can be simple things on there like, the seat depths are just way too short. Have you extended the seat slide? No, didn't know I could do that. You do it, and then they're sort of like, oh, this is pretty decent. You're like, oh god, do I still need to be here? But actually, and again, I was exactly the same as Laura was when I first got in one of these chairs. The idea to just recline into a chair and completely trust it so it's going to support your weight is a little bit odd. And what we will see very often is someone will have, there's so much tension that you can put into this or take off of it. I mean, people will probably get tired of turning the wheel so much, but people will generally, I find, always have it way too tense to start with. And I say to people all the time, once you've sat in it for a bit, you're comfortable with going backwards and forwards. It might be 2 weeks down the line, it might be a month. You've probably more fine-tuned that tension to basically support your weight. Because the problem, I mean, free floating is key, I think, with all chairs, unless there is a reason that you aren't able to do it or you just don't want to do it. Because the thing is when you're working, the chair's in permanent contact. When you recline, the chair goes back with you. And then the important bit as well is when you're coming forward, the chair's assisting you. If you have too much tension on, you're forcing the chair back and it wants to spring you forward. So actually, what are you doing? You're constantly engaged with potentially your core and your lower back. If you don't have enough tension, it will go back fine. But then when you come forward, the chair won't. So you're sort of bringing it forward using your lower back. I'm super happy to hear that Laura's got a sit-stand desk now, which is great. Because actually, I think it's become, even sit-stand desks sort of came about only really into the the key market people actually understand probably in the last few years. You know, they've been around for a very long time, but again, was it considered a bit of a benefit, a bit of a luxury? I'd imagine so. You know, it's great having a chair that will be able to support you and give you some sort of key adjustments if you're sitting down for 8 hours a day. If you can get up, and I say it all the time, if you can make a tea, a coffee, with my height adjustable desk in the afternoon, that's straight up, so I can actually move about. And I'm probably quite similar to Laura in the sense that, I don't know if you do this, Laura, but when you take a phone call, I am literally doing laps around the building, because I'm a bit of a fidget.
I can bear witness to that, because I went to Ergochair the other day and actually saw that Andy does do this. He takes all telephone calls around the building. You're literally in one office space, and then you're moving around the building, being shown around the building. And as you're being shown around, Andy appears again through another door, still on the same telephone call. So, but it's ideal. I don't think we necessarily think as people enough about what tasks we do as well, and how we can do those tasks. I mean, interestingly, Laura, have you ever sat down and thought about when you're doing work? Have you ever sat down and thought, well, actually, that's something I can do away from the desk, or that's something I can do in a more active way? I mean, it's, you know, I used to go and see people and talk to them about, do you use voice notes, for example? Especially now with great AI, where you can talk to your phone or talk to something, and, you know, Chat GPT or other forms of AI are available, can actually then turn that into great text for you. You don't necessarily have to be static all the time. There are things that you can do moving about, and I think sometimes we just need to think about the flow or the workflow of our day, and how we can change that workflow so that actually we can get periods of movement. So if we've stacked up one thing after another where it's all sat there, you need to think, oh, actually perhaps I should break that up a little bit and have something in between where I can move.
Yeah.
You're going to say something, Laura?
Yeah, no, I just 100% agree with that. And I'm sorry to keep banging on about having ADHD, but it really has opened my eyes. That is another huge learning I've had about how I best function and work. And I struggle, like, when I have a long list of emails I need to send, and you're right. And so much of my extracurricular volunteering and campaigning, most of the time it's just me contacting people. If I know that I have to, I just got to go and, like, especially when I had a rigid chair, it really was. It was like, I've just got to go and sit and be static and ping out all these emails. And that doesn't reflect how I like to communicate. That's why I like having movement, whether that be in my chair or, like you say, I am getting back into the habit in 2024 of going out for my lunchtime walk, like a proper hour, taking an hour and doing a walk. And I will dictate whether it's replying to DMs on LinkedIn or Instagram or wherever. And it is a huge difference. I don't need to be doing that on my desk. It just doesn't make sense. And that's not how I function best.
Yeah. Just got to pick up on Jodie's comment, and then I'm going to throw a question at Gab. So she's talking about mattresses. For the most people, don't need to learn how to use them. That's true. You lie on a mattress. It's fairly straightforward. It's a big slab, isn't it, ultimately? But certainly when it comes to things like chairs, people don't necessarily investigate what all of the different whistles and bells do. It's a little bit like software as well, I have to say. I mean, it's quite interesting if you ever look at software. I mean, hands up here who uses Word. Yeah, hands up here who uses probably 30% of Word. It will probably be most of you.
I guess
because I reckon there's a lot of the functionality in a piece of software like Word or Excel which most people do not ever touch, right? And
yeah, I couldn't commit to percentage, Graham, but yeah, I hear what you're saying.
You hear what I'm saying? There will be a large percentage of that software that you never touch. There will be buttons up there that you never go anywhere near, and there may be things that it could do for you that you don't know that it could do for you. The point is that we only start learning those things and really getting the best out of things when we get educated. Gavin, having come into this sector quite recently and listening to this conversation, can you take away anything from that in terms of what the sector needs to do in terms of education?
Definitely an educational piece. I mean, I come from an environment where on our floor there's 100 generic chairs, not designed for any one individual, and you just had to get as comfy as possible and just see out your day every day. If you had a bad back or complain, we had a health and safety officer who just go out to Poundland and buy a little back arch. So you just kind of make do. So coming into this world, it opens your eyes. It's like, wow, just the light bulb moment. What a chair can actually do for you. And I think we said about investing into mattresses and the like. I guess from an individual's point of view, investing in an office chair, yeah, it'd be great. But I think the employee would put the onus on the employer, and the employer may not think the benefits there. Yeah, so maybe there's a little bit of work to be done there.
I'm going to ask Laura from a marketing point of view, because you said near the start of this that ergonomics quite often not really seen as very sexy by many people out there. If you think about beds and bed advertising, bed advertising doesn't talk about the functionality of beds, does it? Right? Bed advertising is quite emotive in a way. It makes you feel it's really how you feel when you're in a comfortable bed, and it talks about that kind of emotive connection to sleep and good rest and all of those sort of things. They don't tend to go into the technical details about what's inside beds. They might show you that it's complicated, but they don't really go into the depth of that. Do you think actually perhaps this sector needs to find more of an emotional connection to what the outcome is, as opposed to, you need this, you've got to, maybe it's a bit too kind of functional at the moment and not emotive enough?
Yeah, I can see that. And I can see how that is really at odds with where and how we talk in the workplace now, especially you see it all across LinkedIn. I mean, that's why I'm oversharing, as I said at the beginning, about my lived experience of how I show up in the workplace, embracing something about me that has previously made me feel like I'm not professional. So, we all talk now about well-being in the workplace, bringing our authentic selves to work. We are prepared to be more vulnerable, I feel now, in most sectors. And so if we are looking for more than work-life balance and actually passion and purpose, yeah, I would like to see an advert that talks about Ergochair being like, this will empower you to have your best day, do the best stuff, like have those conversations, be kind of charismatic, energetic, and kind of an extension of your body and all these things. And yeah, I think that's a really good shout, rather than this will help your backache. It's not sexy. It's not.
Something to take away there, guys.
Do you know what? It's so interesting because I was with my little one watching some adverts, in between something, and he kept going, "What's this one for? What's this one for? What's this one for?" And I was like, "This is for makeup. This is for whatever." And he went, "Will your company do one?" And I went, "Well, I'll have to speak to Ben." I was like, "Do you want to see Daddy, pop on after the first installment of Love Island's been done? Everyone see my face." But I don't know if they would, unfortunately. That might not make ergonomics sexy as such. But it's interesting because I was watching an NFL game the other week or whatever, and there was a chair advert on the American TV. I mean, it was a gaming chair, so it's market wise, it's probably easier to put that onto a TV channel. But it really does make you think. We see bed adverts all the time, everywhere. And it is a big investment to try and get, adverts on TV. But it is interesting because you never see anything really to do with this industry, whether that's height adjustable desks, the assistive technology. But hey, let's watch this space. Ben, I'm sure Ben will be watching this, so you never know. Actor Andy might make an appearance.
That could be pie in the sky, and I'm here to have my cameo as well. I'm ready for that,
okay,
for that representation of visible difference, Ben. But it doesn't need to be a television advert. Maybe that will become, but even just in the way that all of you, when you and you're already doing this, when you came to my house and and we had the assessment. I didn't feel like it was boring. To be clear, I didn't feel it was sexy. But when I'm talking about the word sexy, I feel like communications.
I think we get it. I think we get it. Yeah.
No, good. But just for anyone listening, so no, I would never suggest an Ergochair advert after Love Island, because one, I would never be seen watching that. Made in Chelsea, maybe. But yeah, I do just think though, just like bringing Ergochair and this kind of product into line with what we are seeing on LinkedIn with people talking about the workplace. I think that is really, really important. Just being a bit more real about it. But maybe the reason, like Gav, you were saying, there's an emphasis on who is this product being pitched to? Should it be me as an individual having to fund and buy this, or does there need to be more buy-in from the organizations? And I think until we can agree that we're happy to invest in ourselves as individuals, or understand why our company isn't going to do that for us, do you know what I mean? I think there needs to be a clear decision there on what pathway people are going down, and then they can just make that decision. Yeah, I'm doing it. I'm going to invest in myself. Or yes, my wellbeing team is amazing, and they've talked to Ergochair, and we're going to build this into the costs of in recruiting.
I mean, do you think it was mentioned earlier? But do you think, in all seriousness, actually, the environment that's going to be provided for you, do you not think that should be kind of part of the workplace offering, or the job offering up front in future? Do you think? Certainly, I think we need to think about other places that we can actually spread the cost of this, or put the cost of this as well. One of the things that I've talked about before, especially when it comes to more expensive furniture items like desks and chairs, etc., is potentially talking to those people that are building homes in future. Because at the moment, everybody that's trying to build new homes for the business family, if you like, the two parents working from home, etc., or who are hybrid working, they're starting to look at that floor plan being slightly different and thinking, let's actually have demarcated office space, because people are now working like this. They want that kind of demarcation in their homes. They don't want their workspace to be part of the living room or part of the kitchen area. They want it as an office space. Now, if that's the case, why not have people from the sector actually getting in touch with people like Bovis or Persimmon or other manufacturers of houses are available, or builders of houses are available, and saying, look, could we actually have this available off plan? So when you purchase a house, it's all there. You have that bespoke service. Someone will come in, talk to you about your needs in the same way that they would talk to you about your needs for a kitchen, and it would be designed around you, and then you'd have that space there. Because I bet the thing is, for most people, if they're going to add it to the mortgage, it's a snip. So it's a tiny then cost, and you then won't necessarily think about it. Whereas if you've got or if it's added to the rent, and it's part of the rental of that building. But if you've actually then got to go and buy it afterwards, you're going to think about it a bit more. Yeah, I just think we need to get smarter as well in terms of how we get that placement there.
Can I ask a question? I know I'm meant to be here talking about my experience, but I'd be really intrigued, because when you were talking about that, I was immediately thinking about the other places where we sit on our butt a lot of the time. And I'm thinking things like, you go to the football and you're in those tiny plastic chairs, or you go to the theatre. And just from a modern day perspective, so many of these chairs were not designed, I don't think, for a modern, hip bearing age woman or whatever. So I know obviously we're talking about, and it was such an individualized experience for me, but I'm intrigued from the experts, like, is there a middle ground? Is there another area? So yes, it's not the optimal, which is, you go to you've got a season ticket to go and see Ipswich play, and you've got your seat and it's been designed and it's perfect for you. Did you just boo Ipswich? Like,
I gasped. There's more of a gasp.
Well, the answer to what you're saying is yes. And so it's something that's being looked at all of the time. And then, depending upon who you get involved in a project will depend upon the outcome of that. So if you don't get anybody that understands human design, human factors, which is another word for ergonomics, involved in a design project these days, you will probably miss out on some of that kind of data, because they will bring those appreciations to it. In the same way, you know, I think it's really fundamentally important that we have teams that know a lot about inclusion and accessibility, etc., involved in those design projects as well. How many times have you seen an advert by an office design company on something like LinkedIn, and they show you a wonderful, great new reception desk, and you look at it and you think, well, where on earth is someone in a wheelchair going to talk to the person at that desk? There's no accessibility angle to that at all. And probably if you then went and looked around the back, nobody who is in a wheelchair could actually use that desk as well. So that then prohibits them from employing anybody in a wheelchair, right? So,
or having to make massive changes afterwards and then moan about it and then probably hold it against the individual, because
exactly. So
adjustments rather than just design it, as you say.
So I think really with all of these things, we need multidisciplinary teams involved right from the start that have a better understanding of all of these areas. So, you know, human factor specialists that can actually understand what people need out of the environment and how they're going to interact with the environment. We need, you know, equality, diversity specialists who are going to look and say, well, you know, does this space work as an inclusive space? Is it accessible? Along with a design skill that actually goes, I can put this together so it looks nice. And there's no reason for something. It's a bit like websites and accessibility websites. There's no reason these days why it can't look great and be accessible. There's no reason for that at all. It's just we assume that it can't. So I think companies do need to step up on those sort of things. We can get better at designing around people, and it's like all things, Laura. If we actually design properly around people, it benefits everybody. You know, and partly in ways that we don't even necessarily understand. But you've probably known it yourself that if you go and sit on a tube train or a bus or whatever, and the spaces that you know, the access space for the seats and whatever is better, that if you're, you know, it might have been designed around someone with a disability, but you might be there with a child, or you might be there with more shopping, or you might be there with something else, and you just go, this works. You know, it's more comfortable, it's got better access, I've got something to hold on to, this is good, as opposed to, oh my goodness, I've got to spend the next hour sat like this. Why? You know, nobody wants that as an experience. So there's a massive need, an emphasis for people to design better and get workspaces better. But I think it starts with you know, communication on both sides, really. I mean, companies need to be asking, and we need to be feeding back. We need to be telling people that this ain't good enough. this won't do.
I mean, to be fair, picking up on both something like a football stadium and the tube, you know, it's tricky, because the people that are making the decisions in a football stadium will want as many bums on the seats as they can get in there for the revenue. Everyone knows, you know, the seats, unless you're in hospitality in a Prem team, they are very petite. You know, when I've been to matches, I've seen people carrying little cushions to put on it, whether that's just a cushion from your sofa or an actual sort of comfort cushion. The tube, interestingly, I've never seen this, but we have been told it. One of our products called the Ergochair, which is which way am I going? About this big. It's a couple of bits of foam surrounding like a vacuum air cell. We heard that people were putting those on the tube seats because it's about the same sort of area. And the idea behind it is it will activate So it will assist your sacroiliac. So when you're on a tube, what are you doing when you're moving along? You're just going backwards and forwards. So with this, it's sort of supporting you. So you're trying to get in the camera here. So your spine's almost doing this rather than, I know it's not going to bend about, but your body's not moving as such. Interesting, but again, the tube seats are designed, I can imagine, to fit as many people on the tube as you can. And if people have been to London during rush hour, my goodness, the tubes aren't big enough. So yeah, wouldn't it be great if actually these people who are making the decisions at the top, but say for example, stadiums, thought more so than just, okay, well, we need wheelchair accessibility, so they'll go on the ground floor. Fantastic. So they're almost, if you've been to a football game and you've seen where people with, say, who are in a wheelchair or a disability as such are sat, they're away from everyone else. Well, that's not inclusion. It's inclusion in the sense that they're in the same stadium, but they are sort of pushed to the side almost. But that gets down into a whole nother commercial route of how many people they want in their stadiums and such.
That's another show, Graham.
It's another show, and we will probably pick that up and do that as another show. But I think ultimately, on that whole conversation, I think what's important is that different voices are there, because I think ultimately with anything, of course, there's commercial concern, and there will be commercial reasons why decisions are weighted and go one way or the other. But actually, if you don't have the rub there, if you don't have the tension there within the conversation to at least try and pull it one way rather than totally the other, it never happens. So I think it's really about just making sure that the voices are heard within that conversation, so at least you reach compromise.
Yeah, but I would like to say, I know I'm a visible difference campaigner, but as you know, that's led me to meet lots of incredible, amazing people in the accessibility space, and there shouldn't be any tension. It shouldn't be such a fight. Just think, we wouldn't want to think about tension much, like you were saying. There has to be a balance when we're talking about ergonomics, but having a conversation about what's best and a proper parity of experience so that we all get the same inclusion. And I think that was a perfect example. And so I'm glad you'll do another show on it, talking about the football stadium element and the difference between just being in the stadium and actually having that shared experience. It's a completely different thing. And yeah, it shouldn't feel like we're asking for favors, just like it shouldn't feel like you have to go cap in hand to your employer to say, I've been working at home now for 2 years. I didn't used to have back problems. And now, even though I'm in my early 30s, I'm having to spend £50 a month to treat my body, to repair and backdate challenges that are happening because we haven't just found the antidote to stop that from happening in the first place. What do they always say? Let's not fix the problem. Let's put something in place so there isn't a problem in the first place.
That's very wise. Thank you so much for coming on today. Thank you, everybody, for joining in the conversation. So final thought goes to you, Laura, before we go. I'll allow you to cough first. Which is worthwhile experience. Would you say, if anybody that's thinking about where they go in terms of having a chair, it's worth having an assessment?
I really wanted to be cheeky to be like, nah, just. I know, I was going to say you can say no if you want.
Yes, because that's the kind of relationship I feel I can have now with my assessors, because they were so lovely and passionate. Yeah, 100%. Like, it isn't something I'd properly thought about. And Graham's just put in the comments, thank you. That was the phrase I was going for. Prevention is better than cure. Thank you, Graham. That's what I was trying to say. Yeah, 100%. And I just think it's just, we spend so much of our time sitting at the desk. And our body is our biggest tool. It has to work for us the best we can, and we have to look after it. And we talk about mental health so much in the workplace now, and I think that's great. We talk about being our authentic selves, talk about, in my case, ditching the wig and feeling I can show up and that doesn't make me look one way or another or be unprofessional. And yet we don't feel comfortable to talk about the need of our body to show up and be our best, to sit at this desk for 8 hours, or, you know, take breaks and all this stuff. So yeah, it might not be sexy is the key takeaway. There are lots of practical things we need to think about, but it is an important conversation that we need to be having.
And on that point, which you have just very clearly made, I want to say thank you to everyone that's taken part today. And I want to say thank you to everybody that fed in with the comments as well. I will spend a bit more time actually going through those later on. If you've enjoyed this, please do share it with anyone that you feel it may be of interest with, friends, family, other colleagues. It's been a great conversation today. And you can catch up on this episode and previous episodes at wowergonomics.com. It's as simple as that. Until next time, same place next week. Bye for now.